Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Petrus. I'm a lieutenant in the Public Affairs Office for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I want to welcome you today to the Belmont Center. This is the City of Charlotte facility near the NODA neighborhood in Charlotte. I'm thankful that you're here today, as today ends a months-long effort between CMPD and the community. Late last year, following a viral video of a response to resistance outside of a Charlotte Bojangles restaurant, Chief Jennings requested the formation of the Community and Police Collaboration Group to review the situation and identify areas for improvement. This group was comprised of members of CMPD and the community, and they've been diligent in their work. From policy review and analysis to sessions and recommendations, the Community and Police Collaboration Group has made significant progress in addressing critical issues related to the community and police interactions. Earlier today, the group concluded their work as they met with Chief Jennings to discuss next steps based on their recommendations. Now we're here to address the rest of our community and the media. You will hear from two speakers today. First is Deputy Chief Jacqueline Briley from the Special Services Group of CMPD. Spelling for her first name is Jacqueulyn. Last name Briley, Bryley. She will be followed by Tanya Jameson. She's the facilitator for the Community and Police Collaboration Group, spelling Tonya. Last name Jameson, Jameson. So we'll take questions after both speakers present, so please hold your questions until then. First up, Deputy Chief Briley.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us. The chief supported this group being formed after the use of force incident that occurred outside the Bojangles and off of South Tryon back on November 13th of last year. When this group formed, we knew we would have some tough and challenging conversations, as well as some thoughtful recommendations from the group. Here at CMPD, we do have very high standards for our agency and for our people. Each day, those standards are met by our sworn and our civilian teams who serve our community. We are constantly looking for opportunities to improve, as we are a learning organization. We started meeting with this group in January, and they were comprised of various organizations I would like to thank. Members of CMPD, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Community Relations Group, Community Relations Committee, the Citizens Review Board, the NAACP, Action NC, the Latin American Coalition, members of our clergy, CMPD ambassadors, and the George Floyd Global Memorial. We just concluded these efforts today, and the chief shared his response with the group. The group made several recommendations across three categories: de-escalation techniques and training, use of force, response to resistance policy, and marijuana use and enforcement. Public Affairs will be sending out a complete report of the CMPD responses after this briefing for immediate release. And when it pertains to de-escalation, multiple recommendations were made around training and having a separate policy and engaging with the youth of younger ages. CMPD recognizes de-escalation training as a vital part of everyday police work. CMPD exceeds those standards with its training and is incorporated in numerous blocks of in-service and basic law enforcement training for our recruits. CMPD is actively creating a de-escalation addendum to our current response to resistance policy. For the use of force policy, the common peroneal nerve strikes came up in question, and a reassessment of the techniques were requested by the group. Officers should continuously assess the need for pain compliance techniques and if they are successful while they are applying them. Once compliance is achieved, officers are taught to stop using that technique. We currently have this policy in place to address this, and it was in place at the time of the incident. The community group also wanted family members of impacted by various police interactions to be incorporated into our training with our recruits. We do agree with this recommendation, and we are actively working on where to incorporate this. As it pertains to marijuana use and enforcement, the group did recommend for officers not to investigate, arrest, based on smell or smoking of what appears to be marijuana. They also recommended for CMPD to push the legalization of marijuana. However, marijuana continues to be illegal in North Carolina and under federal law. The chief supports officers continue to have discretion under the current legal standard. In this particular case, the marijuana was tested was illegal. The stop and the approach by the officers was a justified stop. The group also recommended for CMPD to develop a standardized method of communication to prevent officer subjectivity when it comes to enforcement. The chief supports officers issuing citations when applicable. Overall, we appreciate the collaboration and the time everyone spent coming up and reviewing ways that we could improve and grow as an agency. At this time, I'll turn it over to Tanya Jamison, who was our group facilitator.
All right, thank you all. I will say that the last few months have been both illuminating and challenging. This is probably my second time now leading one of these community groups. I am always encouraged that Chief Jennings invites the community to have conversations to try to work with CMPD to improve policy. The frustration I think that some members felt, because they participated with me as well in a previous iteration of this, is that it seems like every couple of years we are coming back because we're facing challenges and sometimes around the same policies of response to resistance. So how do we get beyond just the policies that are in place, but really getting officers to implement those policies so that we can protect both people and officers? One of the points that did come up was the legalization of marijuana, or looking at how we can make this less challenging on officers, whether it's through legalizing marijuana or better regulating the cannabis-related products that are out there. And so that is a challenge that we are facing as a community and trying to figure out community solutions. How can we go on a statewide level to really lift this up so that we can take away some of this ambiguity? One of the points that I really want to highlight, though, is there is a need. How do we do a better job of communication between officers and citizens that are out there in the public so we don't have the type of escalation that we saw in the Steel Creek incident around marijuana? How do we do a better job of being able to talk to each other so we can prevent these types of incidents from happening? And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Did your folks consider also medical marijuana, medical cannabis, because there are people that take marijuana for health conditions? Was that also included in?
We didn't separate out like whether or not it was medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. We were just, the recommendation, as you'll see, that's going to be sent out later on, is just that for the chief to advocate for legalizing marijuana in the state. And he said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. He said, I'm not going to do that. So that's not a step that he is willing to take, as he shared with our group. But at the same time, he also shared that he's not going to actively campaign against it if that's the direction that our state legislature wants to go. So he's leaving it up to lawmakers to make the laws, and he will then, his department will enforce the laws that are on the books.
There was a mention about addendums to what's referred to as compliance flows. What are those addendums? Are there changes? And if so, what does that look like beyond what we just stated?
I don't think there was a mention of addendums to compliance blows. There was addendum in the, I want to say, was it duty to intervene?
It was in separating out standalone de-escalation policy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, it was actually in reference to a standalone addendum to a de-escalation policy was one of the recommendations of the group. So that's something that we are currently working on.
And what is that in particular? How does that work, and what does that look like that you're working on?
So what that would, right now, we're in the early stages of what that will look like, but right now we have this de-escalation in multiple areas of our policy for our agency. And so one of the recommendations was to pull all those out from the individual areas, put them in one location, and so that way, when we start referring to whether our officers followed policy or not, we have one location, one place to go to. So very early in the infancy stages, and this is one of the follow-ups that we will have with the group, is when we start developing that policy and what that looks like, having their input on what that reads.
On the compliance flows, and I heard you talking about that, is there any real change between what the policy was and what has been recommended as a result of this group's meetings?
There's no current change in it. As stated, the assessment of the strikes or the assessment of any type of compliance being applied is taught by the taught to the recruits and taught in service to assess it. And in this particular case, it was sustained as an excessive use of force. And so it is in the books, and it is on policy, and it was actually enforced.
If you can, talk to me a little about the duty to report, the duty of other officers to step forward when they see something going too far. I believe there was a mention, I don't know much farther about where that goes. Where does that stand? Where did it stand before this meeting? Where does it stand now?
So the chief, when he met with a group individually before everybody came in, had an extensive conversation on what duty to intervene looks like. And one of the things we discuss in our agency is duty to intervene looks differently among different situations. And one of the differences between a viral video and watching actual body cam footage is the time, the matter of seconds that pass by, and discussing better communication. There was some communication, but discussing what those levels of communication looks like when there is compliance after some type of compliance strike or compliance method is being applied to an individual.
And is that something that's a discussion point from now forward, or is that something that's a fixed matter as a result of?
It's a continuing discussion.
How might it possibly be changed? I know there are other departments across the country that have looked at the same thing. Is there a department that's modeling or doing something that CMPD would like to move towards? And if so, how does that change the movement from where we are now?
I think it's still probably too early to answer that question appropriately, but that is something that we're definitely going to continue to follow up on with the group.
And when we talk about also duty to intervene, one of the things that we're trying to put forward too is it's not necessarily just intervening when a physical interaction occurs, but how do we prevent that physical interaction from occurring in the first place? And the chief said, you know, it is subjective on how one officer may handle a similar situation, but how can we get to a point where we have a little bit more consistency and that we can prevent these incidents from occurring in the first place?
During the incident, the district attorney brought up that they're not doing anything as far as low marijuana. They're found with low amounts of marijuana. They're not prosecuting that. Was that discussed, and how is that being woven into this concern? Because that is one of the points that was brought up, that they're not even prosecuting if you have a minimal amount of marijuana. So it sort of contradicts even trying to make an arrest. Was that discussed?
It wasn't discussed specifically what the DA said regarding prosecution of low level. What was discussed is, and what the chief reiterated multiple times today, was that marijuana is still illegal in the state, and so therefore his officers are bound by code, the oath they took, to, you know, to make an arrest. One of the things we lifted up was, is there an opportunity, though, if there's not another crime being committed or there's no extenuating circumstances, can officers just issue citations in those incidents rather than making an actual arrest? So that's one of the things that you will see, again, when you see the actual report that we lifted up too. And another point I really want to highlight that we put in the report as well is how can we expand the CARES team, which is right now in the pilot phase, but how can we expand that so for nonviolent situations or where there's a mental health crisis, because we know mental health is oftentimes a factor when we're looking at some of these incidents. So how do we expand the CARES team, and how do we also take the CARES team out of the jurisdiction of CMPD and put it in another city department? And so that's something that the chief and the city manager is also going to be discussing.
Just to make sure I understand the process, so from where we are now, the recommendations have been made, and then it's going through, well, what's the next step? What happens next to make them official?
Oh, the recommendations are official, so it's basically the chief's response to the recommendations, and they lay out in each of the responses what they're actually doing to start implementing them. And then he said to give him some time, he will come back to our committee and let us know how the implementation is going, get more feedback if necessary.
Okay, is there a timeline on when that'll happen, and the chief will come back and further that discussion?
Currently, we don't have a timeline. We want this to be a continued conversation. Again, we want to make sure that we don't just take the recommendations and then nothing happens with it. So we have some internal benchmarks that we're going to try to make sure we put in place to continue to have that ongoing conversation to make sure we're achieving what we're trying to set out to do.
And when you say continued conversation, that is departmental conversation. That isn't something that includes an entity outside, such as this group. Is that correct?
Well, it would be internal and external. So they took the time out to come and meet with us over the past few months. So we want to make sure we continue to keep them abreast as we continue to go through these recommendations.
So the conversation will be with that same group? The conversation-
Yes.
I had a question about the CARES. So what would be the timeline that there possibly could be some community partners pulled in? And what's the current budget and when does that expire?
We don't have all those answers yet. We're just starting the conversation. Yeah, we don't have that one. So I would say you would really want to reach out to that particular department or the city manager's office, because we don't have information on that. So.
Tanya and Deputy Chief Riley, thank you so much. There's a media release out from CMPD that's been posted on our website newsroom. You can go there to find that media release at cmpd.org. In addition to the media release, we have the full report from the group that's been posted there that includes their recommendations and CMPD's responses to it. Okay? All right, thanks y'all for being here. We appreciate it.